Welcome to the webinar on against financial abuse and confidence to cure with Michelle Hoskins, Amanda Casa, and myself, Amy Baker. We're just waiting for people to join up. We can see there's quite a few participants coming through. So in a moment, I'm just going to go through housekeeping, and then we're going to have a very open discussion on such a very important topic that the three of us are very passionate about. So today's webinar is an hour CPD point availability. So AFA will send all that to you. Please feel free to send us as many questions as you want through the Q&A functionality and avoid the chat, as you can see on this slide. We will be recording this, so we will be sending this out to you. Thank you again for joining us. And I'm going to take it over now to the wonderful ladies, Amanda and Michelle. So Amanda had been doing a lot of research on this topic on financial abuse. So I want to start with you, Amanda, and just introduce yourself and also tell us about how you came across this and created the course and then started working with Michelle.
Sure. Amanda Casa, financial advisor I've just had my 20th anniversary this year as an advisor. So long-time member of the AFA and ran the Gold Coast chapter for 10 years, which was a lot of fun, and now Australian chair of MDRT. So like many advisors, I wanted to write a book, and I was a little bit stuck because I just didn't, and apologies to anyone who is, but didn't want to write another wanky book on how to do a budget. I mean, there's enough information out there on how to do that. And I was a little bit stuck on what to do. And I had some stops and starts. And I ended up coming up with, I wonder if our past and our parents impacts the way we still think about money. And I thought, well, why don't I interview people from different walks of life and see? So I got together 18, 19 different people, and some of them are financial advisors, others were philanthropists, head of multi-million-dollar international businesses, through to people surviving on Centrelink, and wanted to know, you know, what was your life like growing up? What did your parents believe about money? And, you know, how does that impact where you are today? What setbacks have you had? Where did it go? So Financial Secrets Revealed was the name of the book, and one of the lovely people I interviewed was Michelle Hoskin, who I knew through MDRT. And when the book came out, I said, Michelle, look, I think there's a really interesting one you'll love in there by a lady called Tanya Target. Now, Tanya I had done media training with to learn to write media releases, how to present, how to do follow-ups, to get, I suppose, quoted and heard in the media. And she had probably one of the craziest stories I'd ever heard. So growing up, her family would tell her things like, you know, they'd drive past a beautiful home and her parents would say, oh, they must be ratbag people in there. You've got to be pretty awful to get ahead in this world, probably drug dealers. So all her life, she associated wealth and doing well with being a bad person. And she ended up escaping from a terribly financially abusive marriage and was coming out of that when I met her to do the media course, and how she'd reinvented herself, used her media skills to grow the new business she was in. And it was just one of those stories I sort of went, what? Like, she went into this marriage with a family trust, property, money in the bank, and came out of it. She had a stroke, adult onset epilepsy. She had absolutely nothing left. She'd been skimming $10 or $20 off the grocery bill when she could to buy grocery vouchers, so that when she got the opportunity to finally leave and stay at friends, she could have grocery money for her and her then young daughter. You know, he would say things to her like, give her these massive ultimatums about, you know, you've got to stop playing in the media and go and stack shelves at Woolies. And so it was just this incredible story that blew me away. And I was so grateful that I knew nothing about this. And Michelle and I spoke about this story in length because it impacted her too when she read that story and went, this is nuts. Like, how many people does this happen to? So, and got her thinking as well about, well, what do I teach Ruby? You know, I actually haven't thought, you know, she's got financial advisors. She works with financial advisors. What do we teach our kids about money? Because the overwhelming feedback was our parents don't teach us anything. There's all those unspoken stories. So that was sort of how it all got started. We ended up catching up at a couple of MDRT events, both going, there's more to this. There's got to be more to this. So ended up doing a heap of research on the subject and thought, look, advisors need to know more about it. It's more and more popular. We've sadly seen it come to light with domestic violence through the rise of COVID. And we just wanted advisors around the globe to be much more aware of it, the signs, what to look for, and know what to do when they come across it. So that's the big picture story of, I suppose, how it all got started.
Well, that's exactly why I want you here today, sort of what signs, what can we do about it, and these stories behind how you've come across and the research that you did, and then going forward, how we as a community and as a profession can help others. So, I mean, that story is quite, in some respects, you kind of think, is that extreme? But you've told me other stories where, you know, we talked about, you know, you're a specialist in aged care, so you've talked about that on the end of the scale where you're dealing with family members financially abusing the elderly. So I want to just expand on some of the examples of financial abuse and some of the things that you uncovered through the research that you did once you sort of went, okay, you know, also involved Michelle in this and gone, there's an issue here, there's a problem, and this is amazing, and we've got to look into it. So just give us a bit of an insight on some of the kind of cases that you've come across so we can get our heads around what financial abuse really is and what it looks like.
Sure. So there's lots of different indications of financial abuse, and as far as the spectrum goes, it's quite wide. So it can be anything from, you know, nicking $20 off Pop's nightstand for elder abuse, or going, you know what, I'm going to inherit that knick-knack, I'll just take that early. They call that inheritance impatience. It can be limiting your partner's employment options. Like I said, you know, giving them an ultimatum of what they're allowed to do, or forbidding a certain type of career or study, or even not allowing a partner to work at all or advance in their career. It could be withholding funds or giving quite a meagre allowance. And I mean, some of these were born out of, I suppose, if our parents were in the 50s, that the 1950 housewife, you know, got the allowance for the shopping each week. And, you know, so born out of some, you know, quite traditional habits, right through to an extreme monitoring of purchases where, you know, you have to show every receipt or give access to your partner to be able to look at what, you know, you're spending every cent on, and then you get roasted over the coals. You know, why did you buy that $20 thing? I know Michelle's got a great story about someone who actually was doing that to themselves. So it can go through to then severely restricting or not allowing to spend on certain purchases. And an extreme example of this is called period poverty, where a partner refuses to allow the purchase of sanitary items during menstruation. So these women end up using tissues, they rob laundromats for socks, they don't leave the house. So pretty horrific form of abuse. Money or assets could be hidden by a partner or invested in trusts that you don't have access to. They may deny you the ability to have your own bank account or fund any personal expenses at all, right through to filing fraudulent insurance claims, forging your signatures, changing wills, powers of attorney. And it can be a standalone form of abuse, or it can be wrapped up in other forms such as domestic violence, emotional abuse, neglect, stalking, damage to property or person. So it's quite a complex thing that doesn't just look like one thing.
Right. Now, there is actually a course on financial abuse, and I'm already starting to get some questions around how, I'll read this. If you notice someone who's being financially abused but is not willing to report the facts, what can we do? What can you do to help them? in this case, it's saying that the abuser is a mature age son. So obviously we're talking about actually a real case situation here.
Michelle, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, morning everyone. It's a delight to be here. I'll just, I will answer the question, but I'm just going to kind of piggyback on something that Amanda said. When I heard the story about Tanya, and when I started chatting to Amanda about, you know, her experiences, a couple of things, and I think this is something I want to reach out kind of directly to everybody that's listening, is when I was listening to Amanda and when I was reading Tanya's story, there was a really like deep realization that this could have been me, or that could have been a girlfriend, or that could have been, you know, a family member. It's so real. And the thing is it can build in tiny steps. And what scared me the most was actually that I recognized some of the stories in my previous relationships. And because I'm quite feisty and strong-headed and determined, I kind of spotted it, but it had no label. I didn't know that it was a thing until speaking to Amanda. So this was the draw in, and Tanya's daughter at the time of me understanding Tanya's story was the same age as my daughter. And I was just horrified, you know, as Amanda said, it was like, you've got to be kidding. So this was where the course was born, and that's why we did the work, and we've done the work. I think, and Amy, just repeat the question for me, just so I make sure I get this right.
If you notice someone who's being financially abused, but who's not willing to report the fact to the police, what can you do to help them? The abuser is their mature son. Yeah,
so I think as a financial advisor and planner, and this is a global statement, there has never been a more perfect person placed to support. So this is not necessarily, you know, you coming to the rescue and fixing all their problems, or, you know, tackling the abuser, or, you know, this is just a case of showing your support. So this training and this understanding and this skill set links very much into a similar approach. If any of you have been trained in mental health and certifications around mental health. So the first thing is, you know, show your support. And the way that, and Amanda can piggyback on this as well, is if you spot a sign, and there's lots of signs and I can talk more about them, but if you spot a sign, you can approach the victim or the potential victim and say, you know, when this happens, I feel quite uneasy about it because it goes against my values, or it's behavior that makes me feel uncomfortable. How do you feel about that? Is this normal behavior? So there's an opening to the questions around the raising it gently, softly, without judgment. And I think the sentence which is the most powerful that you as planners and advisors should use a lot is, I'm here to listen without judgment, and say it with such sincerity that it wouldn't matter what was said. They know that you're listening. You might not have all the answers, but you're listening without judgment. I'm here to support you without judgment. And I think that opens up, for the person that's asked that question, that opens up the dialogue. Now, you can't make them go to the police. In some countries, it's not a criminal offence. Sometimes they don't want to do anything about it because there's other reasons that they are using the support or the care of that grandson or, you know, family member or whatever partner. And there's such a thing called trauma bonding. And it's horrific, but it's almost like where somebody gets addicted to the trauma and the attention that it gets. It's horrifically sad. So there's other parts at play, but the immediate is, I'm here to, you know, when I see this or when I hear this, you know, this makes me feel uneasy, or I'm not happy about it, you know, is this normal? And if there's anything you want to talk about, I'm here to listen without judgment. And then just keep scratching away at the surface, you know, keep your eye out, keep that open dialogue. The odd message, is everything okay today? Not, is everything okay? Is everything okay today? How are you today? And the conversation, you'll find that it will soften, and the person will open up eventually. And that's as much as you can do at that point.
That was you're answering some of the questions that I was going to ask in regards to, I guess, us using soft skills as advisors. We're always asking probing questions to uncover people's financial position and what their goals and what their objectives are and where they want to go. And they're coming to us for that, but it's really, but, you know, sort of unlayering, you know, all of that further stuff and sort of trying to see more into what their situation is. So can you sort of expand on, and both of you sort of come in with this, on what kind of questions or things that you either can ask, but other things, what signs are you seeing that probe these questions as well? So if you don't mind, it's a very long-winded question, sorry, because there's so many things that are going on in my head here, and there's some questions coming through, so I'm trying to capture it all. But let's start with, give us some ideas of where you can recognise some cases of financial abuse and examples of probing questions that you can ask.
Amanda, do you want me to kick off and you back?
Yeah, absolutely. Knock yourself out.
So a couple of things. So take the role that you do off the table for a second. Just be a person, right? You've got friendship groups, you've got family member groups. You know, you hang out with mums and dads from the school, and you know, you have people around you. And I think what's really important is that you are very aware. So one of the things I was just going to say to kind of backfill what I just said was, one of the things you can do as a planner, as an advisor, is if in your next podcast or in your next article or mailer, raise the subject of financial abuse, economic abuse, right? Economic well-being, because it's likely that there is more people within your client banks that are suffering financial abuse or economic abuse, and I'll explain the differences in a moment, but they don't even know it's a thing. It's just, oh, things are tight, you know, we've had, you know, COVID, you know, well, that's what happens when you get married. You have your own joint, you know, you share a joint bank account. And actually, when you start to kind of show what these things are and talk about them, you know, demystifying some of this stuff, they go, oh my God, that's happening to my brother, or, you know, that's me, or I'm the perpetrator. Like, this is, so I think there's an awareness piece that you can all do straight up. Just to be very clear, there's a number of definitions. We've got coercive control, we've got economic abuse, we've got economic well-being, we've got financial abuse, right? These are all terms would effectively what they refer to is an individual in financial abuse, the case of financial abuse, an individual using money to control the other party in some way. Economic abuse is a bigger picture. Financial abuse is part of economic abuse. Economic abuse is where an individual restricts the access to the resources an individual needs to be self-sufficient, to survive, to have a fruitful life, to, you know, just get through the day. And it's a restriction piece, which is where the abuse piece comes in, any element of restriction. So some of the signs, Amanda will have hundreds. I have a few that really pick out in my mind. It's very common in divorce, right? So there's elder abuse and all that. But I'm talking about in post-separation. So I want you guys to be looking at your clients that are currently going through a separation and just try and identify where money is being used in a negative context, in the space and conversations around child maintenance. There is a huge increase now, and particularly with home working, and I'm using the gender example, but it impacts both parties, where the males in the family going through a divorce are going for 50% custody of the children because they now work from home, even though they work till 7 o'clock at night, but from home. They've never shown any interest in the children before COVID and working from home. Now they're going for 50% of custody in order to reduce the payments passed to the caring parent, the predominant caring parent. And that is a form of financial abuse. That is now classed in Parliament in the UK. It's been passed as now a criminal offence. So people are going through divorce. When there is conversations around marriage, you know, have a conversation with your clients when they're due to get married. Well, you know, you're going to keep your separate bank accounts. And the wife goes in and saying, absolutely not. We're having a joint bank account and I'm in charge of it. You know, conversations like this. So there is the post-separation piece. There is the marital piece. And, you know, taking your role aside you know, have a real think about your girlfriends and this piece around, you know, and your friends that you know, this piece around their economic resources where things may have been restricted for them, or, you know, they've gone a bit, you know, I've got a friend, you know, Amanda touched on it earlier, you know, she is absolutely the subject of economic abuse, right? And her attire has declined, her personal hygiene has declined, and effectively she's doing that to herself, and it's a form of self-sabotage. But ultimately she's in an economically abusive relationship, and her husband drives around in a Ferrari, right? And she looks like she's just been dragged through the street, and it breaks my heart when I see her. But I'm dealing with that because of this skill set. So it's not just about the job that you do, it's about us just being aware of who we are. But the post-separation piece, from me to you, is the biggie, the one that you're all involved in, the divorces of husbands and wives, and it's where you can probably add the most and spot it the most. And then Amanda's probably got 100 more. So shoot, kiddo.
Yeah, so for Australians, there is an elder abuse hotline, a 1-800 number that you can look up in your state. So if it's something you haven't come across before, like Julie put up about the mature age son reporting, you know, abusing his parent, call the hotline and just say, look, I am a financial advisor. There's this situation. What can I do? And look, they're not fixers either, but they can point you in the direction of resources in your state. And look, she may not want to report it to the police, but she may want to deal with it within the family environment. Perhaps there's other siblings that can be brought in, or, you know, roundtable discussions with a mediator, financial counselling. And it also depends very much, I think, on your relationship with the client and your personal approach in the situation. So for some of it, it will be very softly. For others, you might want to tell an anecdote or a story about something similar that happened to someone you know. Or in other cases, you can just go flat out, look, the rat bag's abusing you. I don't want to stand for it. My job is to protect you, and I'm not letting it happen. So it depends very much on a whole set of circumstances. But one of the tools Michelle mentioned earlier is a formula that psychologists use, not only in these situations, but in any, that I feel, when, because. So I feel, insert the emotion, anger, frustration, tired, sad, mad, whatever it may be. When I see your son abusing you, when I hear about this story, when this happens, because XYZ, I don't like seeing it, it's a criminal offence, it upsets me. I mean, you can use this in your marriage, as you know, and with your children as much as you can with your clients. It's a fabulous formula, and the reason it takes the edge off is you're talking about your emotions. You're not saying this bastard's attacking you and you need to be aware of it and do something, because you're just going to get people's backs up. If you're talking about, look, I feel really sad, upset when I see your son doing this to you, because my role is to help and assist you, and he's not allowing me to do that, is much better than let's get the bastard, which mums don't want to do to their sons. They don't want their baby boy to be in trouble, even when he's hurting them. So it's a complex and layered, you know, nuanced scenario that takes all sorts of responses. And as much as we'd both love to tell you, look, by the end of the course, there's this fabulous cookie cutter approach and you can just do this one thing and everything gets fixed. God, that'd be cool. But it just doesn't work that way.
No.
The thing is, Amy, just one thing, it starts with honesty. Be honest. Like, if you spot it, share your feelings. Amanda's right. Reflect to yourself and say, I'm feeling this is not nice, I don't like to see this. But it's got to come from a position of honesty. And I financial abuse course aside, there's still so many advisors I see and I know that are just not being totally honest with their clients about the things they spot. They'll talk about the products and the solutions and the advice, but be honest. It's your greatest superpower as planners and advisors. Share what you're feeling, say what you think, say what you spot, and that will apply to any conversation you're having with clients. This one obviously prominent for our chat today.
Absolutely, 100% agree with you. I think it really establishes a greater bond between us and our client, but also I know we've all been swamped with the political changes and Royal Commission, but the fact is that we're there to support and look after our clients and act in their best interest in every way. And having this relationship is only going to do the right thing and build trust, and trust within the client relationship just expands and expands. I did go off topic there, but it's really, I agree with you on that one. And it's a really important thing. So we really do, as a community and an industry, or as a profession, need to be really honest with ourselves and honest with what we're experiencing, what we're seeing. Now, I want to go back to, again, some more excuses and more situations, I should say. I got distracted there because there was a message on the screen that threw me there. More cases, more little things, or even subtle things that you would see that kind of can indicate potential financial abuse or economic abuse. Can you give us some more examples? Because I'm thinking we all probably come across far more than we actually are seeing. So sometimes it's very obvious, but there could be some really subtle examples that we're not aware of.
Yeah, there's a few people I interviewed for the course, and different stories that came up. So one of the ladies I interviewed was a lawyer, a family lawyer, and some of the cases she'd seen. I said, look, I'm particularly interested because generically it is tradition that the man is still the breadwinner and the woman stays home and minds the baby. So it's much more common still in financial abuse that it's man abuses woman. In elder abuse, that goes out the window. 50-50 men and women are abused by their family members. So there's not a particular slant that way. But one of them it was in a mixed race marriage. He was just very much an Aussie bloke who wanted to kick back as a fly in, fly out worker, wanted to pop home on weekends, have a beer, put his feet up, enjoy dinner and play with the kids. And she would belt him with like a towel rail, tell him he's not making enough money. And when they finally separated, she'd been siphoning money off to send back to her home country and family for many, many years. He had no idea that he was a victim of not only financial abuse, but domestic violence. He just thought, oh, well, they're feisty where they come from. That's how it is. So again, there's that awareness piece of, mate, you're a victim of domestic violence and financial abuse. So, that one's probably a bit out of the ordinary. He just, thought he was, the worker and provider, and, she did the rest. So
well, we just got a question from Ben actually saying, what resources are there for men going through divorce and being on the receiving end of financial abuse? There seems to be a great amount for women, but nothing for men. So you tapping into that and actually giving an example of a guy going through it is actually great, because it happens on both sides.
The truth is, the resources are the same. Like, you could phone a women-focused hotline on abuse, and they'd help guys. Like, there might be pink all over their website, but fundamentally there is the resources available at the same places as there are for the thing around the women piece. Just to head that off, right, is if you think about generational change. My grandma, didn't work. She had a cleaning job. My granddad brought in all the money. When my granddad died, my grandma literally found over hundreds of thousands of pounds in boxes in the house, and she was walking around with holes in her knickers, an overall, because he said that they never had any money. When he died, she went cruising around the world, and she's only just died, and she's not stopped. She was loaded. So they didn't earn. Amanda's point about looking after the kids is right. This is really the first real generation, in my opinion, where women are becoming empowered and more self-sustaining. And that's why, I was in a relationship, in terms of triggers, I was in a relationship where I had the most financial capability. I paid for everything. And one day I was, and this is, you might not spot this as advisors, but this is normal life. I was at home, and he came home and he said, I've ordered a piece of art. They're bringing money. He had no money. He said, I've ordered a piece of art. I was like, where from? Like, why and where from? And how much was it? He was like, it's £2,500. And I was like, who's paying for that? And he went, well, I thought you could. Now, if I was any other type of person, I mean, I told him to sling his up or can go and do one. But if I was any other type of person madly in love, I'd be like, oh, okay, darling, you know, and I'm a strong, independent woman, but there are others that, you know, so this is like real life. Like, you know, so the spot where you may have a person in the relationship that's the financially strongest in terms of their capabilities and their own resources, and have a conversation around, you know, well, how does that play out in your relationship, particularly if it's the woman? Because, you know, there's lots of things I could say about it, but ultimately, you know, one of the things that was amazing in one of Amanda's interviews was, on the course was, and I think it was Marie that said it actually, she said, they want what you've got. And that can be male or female. So abusers want what you've got. So was that Marie, Amanda?
Yes. Yeah.
Marie, right. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, again, you know, Marie had been in financial services all of life, very wealthy, the last person you think would be a victim of abuse. So this can happen to anybody. You don't have to be, you know, English is my second language, I'm a minority group, I come from a patriarchal society. You know, it can happen to anybody. So for those who don't know, Marie Lalensack is more than happy to share her story. Her second husband tried to murder her on a boat to take all her assets. And like I said, this woman had worked in financial services all her life. And it's the most horrific. She usually can tell it without a tear, but when I interviewed her, she got a bit choked up retelling this story again. And look, there's one that's come up in the questions, you know, a savvy financial man whose wife is emotionally abusing him. And I think if he's refusing to discuss it, it makes it very, very difficult. So I think using that formula of, you know, Dad, I feel so upset when I see your partner hurting you, abusing you, causing you suffering, because I know, you know, you are a savvy financial man, you've always had your shit together, whatever those things are. So putting it back to your feelings is really important and may or may not open up the door for him to then discuss it. And then, you know, again, calling that 1-800, the Elder Abuse Hotline, and saying, what do I do? How do I help? What resources are in my area to be able to use?
In this case, it's actually a financial planner.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which also makes it harder in some ways because there's a pride factor. How could this happen to me? I'm very embarrassed. There's shame. So it's a very tricky one, especially for a man who, you know, is an 80-year-old planner. He's probably been terribly successful in his life, and to now be entering frailty years and coming across, you know, the person who's supposed to be his loving partner now doing this, that can cause that shame and fear, anxiety, depression, and, you know, it can spiral into all sorts of, you know, other emotions. And even just knowing to start with, Dad, I see you, I see what's happening, I'm here if you need me, but I just want to let you know I see it and I don't like it. You know, that can be, and it may take time for him to be able to go open up.
Well, unless the new wife is a total narcissist, she might have no idea what she's actually doing as well. Like, this is when I did an interview once. Actually, it was not long after yours, Amy, and I was interviewed by another advisor. And when we stopped recording, he said to me, he's like, "Shit," he said, "I think my brother is financially abusing his wife." And he was literally like dumbfounded because of what we'd spoken about on the call. But it might be the case of, going to the wife in a conversation and saying, "Oh my God, let me tell you about this story that's happening at work," and kind of bringing it out in the general chit chat. And she might not quite realize it to the level that it's actually a form of abuse. It might just be that she's high maintenance, she likes the luxuries in life or whatever it is. But you've got to kind of come at it from both angles with this awareness piece. I think, again, with honesty, that's the killer kit thing you have in your kit bag, really.
I think one point that you raised earlier, Amanda, in regards to this financial, and actually you've also brought this up, Michelle, in financial abuse, is that it's come from other generations. And it is probably caused, the coaching stuff that I do, it's a lot of this stuff is subconscious behavior. And we enter into relationships and we have this new amount of trust with somebody, and it's all, roses and amazing and everything's fantastic initially. And by then it's sort of almost too late to realize that that might not be their intention to be abusive. I guess it comes back down to the trust we, when we recognize it, create and build to get them to see that that behavior is actually not okay, but also can be quite harmful, and it is considered abuse. And it's not an easy conversation to have. So I just wanted to go back to a question that came up that I thought was a great question. And this is from, financial planners do often meet couples in the first instance. One is taking control of the finances, and the other is a quiet one, silent. How do you, what signs are there to tell that you're the silent partner or being mistreated? So in some cases they might not be, but in other cases they may be mistreated.
I think directing questions directly to the more quiet party is really telling, because they'll either sit there and shut up and let the other partner take over, or if they go to make a response and the other partner talks over the top of them and doesn't allow them to have an opinion or a say, that's a very telling sign that this person doesn't have a say in the relationship. And look, it may not be appropriate for the advisor, especially in a first interview, to go, all right, I think she's the downtrodden little housewife. I mean, it may be that we go, okay, well, there's techniques we can use. They're both working. Why don't we set up that they both maintain their independence? They keep personal bank accounts. But when we set up their cash flow, let's look at having a joint account where, the money for all their bills we set up goes into a pot. When it might not be 50-50, based on income, it might be 70-30, or whatever the case is best for them. So instead of, jumping in and controlling and going, right, sweetheart, I'm helping you out right now, it might be that the planning is the answer, that, we can maintain our independence so that nobody is ever in a situation where they have to walk away with nothing, but that either the joint goals are met out of a joint pot, or you'll take care of these bills and you'll take care of these. Whatever the planning or cash flow. And look, if that's not something you do as a planner, make an alliance with somebody who does. There's so many millennial planners, money coaches. Amy, I'm sure you can highlight some people who can help with that style of things for planners who don't do that, that maybe that is more the answer than digging down into, look, sweetheart, I think you're abused and I really want to help you. So, sometimes that's not the tact that we need to take, but there might be a planning solution that can help out.
Yeah, can I add to that? There's one of my clients here in the UK, they positioned their whole piece around finance with balance. They called it kind of money with balance, and I think this is an incredible bold step. But they would not. If a husband or a wife came to them independently for financial planning and financial advice, they would not do anything with them unless the other party was present. And this is because, you can't set dreams and aspirations with one half of the family. And in some cases, they bring their children in. It was a real family affair, and they felt that the balance it kind of nipped this whole subject in the bud, because there was that, well, everybody's sitting around the table. And also, sometimes when they invited children, it was the children that were putting humongous pressure on their parents to not spend, not take that trip. So, when you sit with clients and they're talking about, we're quite conservative, we're not really that kind of family. We don't want to go touring around the world on a cruise. It's actually not them speaking. It's because they've had the pressure from their inherited generation that's coming up saying, well, you're not spending all of our money, are you, mum and dad? And the pressure's been, think about your grandchildren. So, but you'll never probably meet those children. So, Amanda's bang on. It's a bold step, though, to open it out and say, well, actually part of our process is that, we want to engage with both parties equally. We're about equal planning. Amanda's point is the most obvious one of, she's not interested in the money, or he, I take care of all the money, he doesn't earn any money, or whatever. These are little telltale signs, but the triggers is a key thing, Amy, right? So, there's signs, but there's triggers that will trigger it being a situation. Marriage is one of them. COVID has been another, a loss of job. coming into a huge amount of money. So you all get excited when clients inherit money, or sell their business. But actually, that's a trigger for, you girls know this, is that, there's not the understanding of how to manage that amount of money. There's a relationship with that money that's so off kilter that it can become suppressive, or they have $1 million in the bank but don't spend any, and therefore still walking around with clothes with holes in, for example. So there's these trigger points. Inheritance is one, marriage, but you've got an incredible job to do as planners and advisors. And one of the reasons I did this course with Amanda was I did a social media polls, several of them, do you know what economic abuse is and what financial abuse is? And the consistency was no idea. Is that same as treating customers fairly? Is that same as vulnerability? I'm like, no. That's when, like Amanda said, we needed to do something, because the education was what was not there at all. Not at all.
Wow. And we've just had COVID. We're still kind of in some places still in the midst of it. Still people are still in work. Well, most of us now work from home. Which is quite isolating. So when you're in a situation where you are experiencing some level of abuse, it can be even more isolating. Yeah. In that situation, it's harder for us to reach out and see people and talk to people. What kind of things are we looking for when we're dealing with this kind of new environment among sort of these restrictions that we're facing now? Have you got any kind of examples of subtle cases that you could share?
I think it's the very standard, the change in behaviours. The girlfriend who used to love to come out for a drink, that, would be the life of the party, and, all that sort of thing. All of a sudden now she's not allowed out anymore, or, I'm needed somewhere else. The excuses don't quite ring true. Sometimes calling people on, what's this all about? I mean, having said that, I've become a total hermit since COVID. I'm like, oh, now do I have to go out? I'm so used to being at home. It's like, oh, do I have to get dressed? So it can be that simple, or it may be that, that they were saying in some areas the domestic abuse went so bad because everyone was home with COVID, but the hotline calls went down because the partner was home and you couldn't make the call. So they're saying, although cases have gotten so much worse, a lot of them couldn't be reported. So it's such a different world that this pandemic, 1 in 100 year thing has brought up. So, 100 years ago, we were coming out of the war years, moving up to the Great Depression. So our great grandparents sort of era, who then raised, the war babies, who had our parents who were the baby boomer era coming out of the war. So they grew up with these families that were very frugal. They composted, they saved, they fixed things, they repaired things, they didn't throw out. They had this loyalty to brand and product, which, moving to, I suppose, your Gen X generation, which is around my levels, we grew up sort of not quite embracing everything that our parents wanted. It was a bold new world, a bit of free love thrown in, and all that, the 70s coming out, we don't want to go to war anymore. To our children who've grown up in a world of abundance, they don't know and have never seen deprivation or, privation, or they haven't had those stories that grandma used to tell about, eating the bread and dripping during the Blitz that, maybe we are more familiar with, or we've read the books or seen the movies. So for the generation now, this Z and Alpha, I mean, to me, COVID was, okay, you stay at home a few weeks, whatever, you can't hug people, that's a bit of a bummer, it'll come back. Whereas to these, the mental health issues that this severe event for some people has caused, they're doing now behaviours that may be coercive or controlling, or they're acting out because they don't understand this strange new world that we're living in with all these restrictions. So it's very interesting to see how these generational activities play out over time. And I don't think we've quite seen the full fallout from COVID yet. And I think our resilience, our own levels of, self-worth and, the research and investment we do in our own mental health will really play out, and how we help people through that is going to be interesting. And I think it's going to be, Michelle and I have already spoken repeatedly about how does this course evolve over time, because this isn't something that's going to stay the same. And look, most courses you do them, you hang your shingle on the wall, you never need to worry about it again. We don't want that with this course because times are constantly changing and we need to keep the information updated all the time because of all this new weird stuff that's happening in this crazy world we're living in. And look, the talk is more and more and more that we are heading into a war, you know, with China. You don't have to be, you know, a rocket scientist or not listen to the media in ages to understand that there's talk. So, you know, how do we then handle these situations going forward? I'm sure, you know, we're not going to have the bombers, you know, heading over the Gold Coast and the Blitz in London again, but what does it mean for us and for our children? And, you know, not just the abuse side of it, but our mental health. And, you know, narcissism comes into financial abuse a lot. Mental health is a huge reason why people, you know, choose to do coercive control. So we're still learning so much about the brain that's why this is going to be evolving. And you know, I think we've already spoken about how do we bring more mental health resources into the course, because our role is we're financial advisors. We're not counsellors. We're not mental health experts. So how do we help these people or point them in the right direction to get the help that they need? Or how can we have the basics to be able to recognise and point people in the direction they need to take? Like I've said already, it's such a layered, nuanced, complex area. But, you know, our role is to help people financially. But how do we best do that?
Yeah. Amy, can I add, right? So what just so everyone knows, because Andrew's asked a question, we'll share lots of resources. There's actually a YouTube, there's a charity in the UK that there was a YouTube interview bringing financial economic abuse into the mainstream, and we're going to share it. Amy will stick it in the.
I'm going to stick it in both because people are putting questions in the Q&A and the chat, so I'm putting it in both.
And watch it because that basically lists some of the main resources that you guys can tap into in terms of for abusers, for victims. So these are the resources that you can, and obviously in our course there's tons of resources that you can tap into. What I would say is, just to flip the gender, some of the, you know, I've got guys that are friends who, I mean, my friend Alex, for example, you know, her husband had high-powered job, travelled a lot, earned a huge amount of money. They lived in this beautiful big house. COVID hit. Now, prior to COVID hitting, Alex would need to take sleeping tablets at night because she hated him being away from home. Okay, she was an absolute bag of nerves. She hated him travelling, but he needed to travel for his job. He's now been working from home. She is an absolute bag. She's a wreck with the thought of him going back out to work, back out to traveling. So when I saw him, he's a nervous wreck. He's having to get a different job. He's having to work harder. The pressure from the homemaker, often the female, to, you know, you can't go to work, you know, you must stay at home, you need to get another job, earn more. So sometimes the kind of this constant want to drive and get a better job. And like Amanda's used a lovely kind of questioning, you know, what's going on here? You know, when you have that conversation with the guy who's like, she wants this and she wants that, or, you know, this is not happening, I need to provide this. Just listen, try and understand, peel it back, understand what's actually going on. Why this change? You've just got to be observant, guys, like to be aware of changes in behavior and what's going on. I think you know, we'll share lots of resources and stuff, but you know, there's also this piece around, and I want you to watch for it, where you've got parents when they're doing their wills and their trusts and they're talking about their beneficiaries, and they use language like, I'm not giving them anything, they don't deserve it, or I don't like his current wife, or you know, I'm going to spend it all. So you're looking for sort of not narcissistic behaviors, but traits where you look at somebody and just go, you're not a very nice person, are you? Right? And you know when you're sitting in front of somebody and you go, you're really not that nice. So you've got to kind of think, well, do I actually want to work with that person because they're not very nice? But you know, what else is going on? Dig a little bit. And you have, you know, there's no other profession on the planet that can dig like you can. when you're talking about money. You know, you're primed up for it. The question from Suzanne just picked up, is codependency part of financial abuse? I think it depends where the boundaries go. You know, I think, yeah, you know, I think there's a partnership piece. I think there is an honesty between partners. I think if you're, you know, it's a partnership. If there's it's about balance. If there's an imbalance in any way, and there's a vulnerability anywhere, that's when somebody can take advantage. They can literally take advantage. You know, and one of the, sorry, just to add in, you know, if someone says they can't be trusted with money, classic sign of, well, I need to be in charge of the money. I mean, how often, if I asked you for $1 for every time you've heard that, you know, you'd be loaded, right? They can't be trusted with money. They're just not interested in our finances. Well, maybe they are, and you're just not letting them be interested in finances.
There's another one where women have come out of very abusive relationships and they've been told all their lives, you can't handle the money, you're not allowed. And often these women are rock star budgeters. I mean, they've had to feed a family of 5 on $100 a week. They know how to make their money last better than anybody else. So trying to turn some of those deep-seated, long-held beliefs on their head, again, it takes that digging, you know, for someone who's always been told you're useless, who believes that. Well, how do you prove they're not? I mean, I wouldn't know now how to feed a family of 5 on $100 a week, but, you know, you've been doing it for 20 years. So, you know, there's those little traits that we might be able to turn around and go, you know what, you're pretty bloody cool when it comes to comes down to it. And I mean, there's advisors who deal in that space. So I think forming alliances, if you're sitting there going, look, I don't think I can help you, I'm out of my league, I'm out of my depth, I don't know where to go. There's advisors in the AFA who deal specifically with people coming out of divorces, you know, with just divorced women. I interviewed Dominique Burgle-Grant as part of the course as an advisor who deals specifically with divorced women. And one of the things she said to me, the husband had no idea that his wife felt abused or a victim of abuse because he would, you know, give her a generous allowance. And he said, I just wish she'd spoken to me. But like, it's too hard to fix it now. We're divorced and we're down the track, but I just never knew she felt that way. You know, it's so easy to just bottle things up or shut up and put up, rather than having that open, honest communication, because it's hard or because your parents never did it and you don't know how to. Ask for help. I mean, we're exactly the same. We don't know how to fix all these things.
100%. We have a lot of hats we have to wear. I guess the first and most important thing is we're asking the right questions and we're recognizing when there's problems. There are a lot of specialists across the board in this industry. One of the things I do is...
Amy. Profession.
Pardon?
Profession.
Sorry.
You'll get hung, drawn and quartered for using words like that.
And it's actually, you know, we're all sort of upskilling at the moment. We're all sort of polishing up our skills on consumer protection and all of that kind of thing. And one of the things is if we recognize something that we know we're not across, we need to refer. Now, there are people in this industry that do, like, the money coaching is all about behaviors and subconscious behaviors and working on actually digging up some of the past, working out that they may be the abuser and they may be the ones that, or they may be the victim, and they may, you know, even play the victim and sort of stay in that space. Some people come and actually recognize this and ask for help and appoint someone like myself to do that. But if you're recognizing that there's even a couple, there are people out there that actually can help. I refer clients to psychologists. I refer clients to kinesiologists. I refer clients to hypnotherapists. It sounds a bit crazy, but obviously depending on what they're open to, as another way of getting them sort of that mental health aspect as well. Because there's only so much we can do. But I guess the first part, and one of the most, you know, one of the biggest reasons why I wanted to get this webinar up is to bring this awareness. Because if we've got the awareness, we've got some key things. We've today learned some great questions, and also how to, you know, the listening skills and how to recognize and actually even get our heads around what financial abuse really is. Then the awareness can actually spread, and that we can all start helping others. And that's what we're in this industry for in the first place.
Yeah, I think every time I drop a new expression on Michelle, from gaslighting to period poverty to granny dumping, she's like, oh my God, we need new chapters all the time. Like, what is that? So
I'll say to the team, I'm speaking to Amanda on Wednesday, they go, please don't. No, because it means you know, on one of the big reasons to do with the course setting up and what my kind of vision was is that I wanted we have like this, you know, financial abuse certified logo, right? And the reason I wanted a logo, which is why I said to Amanda about having a standard for it and a certification, is because I want consumers to be able to find the beacons, those that have the specific knowledge around this specific subject matter. And that's how we structured the course. So you do the learning, you submit your evidence. We ask for a video kind of testimonial, you know, so you can present to us so we can see your kind of eyeball to eyeball approach to this, your feelings about it. There's a submission of your processes and procedures, you know, what you would do, your action plan, the resources you would use to send clients to, should you find that they're a victim or they are the abuser. And you get this certification mark, you know, and without taking the kind of the importance away from this, this is an opportunity for you to stand out as a planner and as an advisor in the thousands that there are, that you have this expertise. You're going to get business from lawyers who are, you know, dealing with family law and they need an expert in financial abuse or economic abuse. You would be it. And I wanted these ambassadors floating around the world saying, you know, I can help you because I have these skills. I know, I understand. And one of the things I was just about to say, because Linda, I just saw I think it's Linda, yeah, about the dodgy wife. What I would say is you can always offer as a financial planner and advisor to join your client in a conversation that's a meeting specifically about it with a potential abuser, or you can say to the potential victim, you know, let's go incognito and let me bring it up at the meeting. So it's not you raising it, I'll be your mouthpiece. Let me raise it. I'm on your side, right? So I think it's really key for this support piece before you do anything. Listen without judgment, say you're there, and be there on their side of the table to support them. And that's, Linda, really what you need to do for your dad. If he's not going to budge and he's not going to talk about it, just say, like Amanda says, I'm here until you need me. I'm not letting this go, Dad. You know, and be, you know, call it out and hold your ground. Hold your ground.
There are a few more questions that I want to ask, and we're running out of time. I mean, we could talk on this for so long. So there's so many nuggets here. Firstly, I'm just going to read a comment from Darren. Hi, Amanda and Michelle. Thank you so much for enlightening us on this topic. Aside from raising your concerns directly with the client who is the victim of financial abuse, in the case of an elderly client who may not want to expose or shame their child, what other options can you suggest to assist the client to address or resolve the issue?
You go, Amanda.
Some of it may be an estate planning tool. You may need to involve an estate planning lawyer. Again, without lots of information, it's hard to say what to do. Look, depending on what state or country you're in, the laws differ around elder abuse. If it's, you know, look, it can vary from, look, I'm going to take a few file notes and monitor this, to I'm actually calling the police myself because this is fraud and it needs to be reported. I did have to say that to a client who had been pushed around by her son's girlfriend. And I said, you need to let me know by Monday if you want this reported. This is physical abuse. And I'm more than happy to take it unless you give me reasons why you don't want me to. And we'll have another discussion about it then. So they, in the end, went to their son, had the discussion, and gave me a good enough reason why I wouldn't take it to the police. But, you know, if they're not brave enough to, and somebody sees it and it's a crime, we may have to do that. So, and look, whether you do that anonymously or, you know, say our position, then, you know, it's tough. But sometimes we need the tough love to get things to change.
Also, I want to have a driver behind that is that the stats differ depending on which organisation's done the research, but they estimate that between 80 and 90% of financial abuse cases, domestic violence is also present. So you might not see the bruise on the arm or the physical abuse that's happened, but one of the drivers was if we as a community can spot financial abuse and eliminate it and deal with it and support, it's likely that we will also stop the domestic violence that's happening, because abusers always work from home, and financial abuse has no physical bound. Like, it can go on for 30, 40 years after a divorce. You know, economic abuse goes on, and it doesn't mean you don't need to be in the same room as somebody. And that's where the coercive control piece comes in. And it links so heavily to people taking their own lives because they literally cannot cope anymore, because they've escaped the abuser physically, but emotionally, and they're still there.
Which there's a question here. If you feel you're a victim of financial abuse, where do you go? Who do you turn to?
I think having fabulous relationships, just reach out to a very trusted friend or family member to start with and talk about what you're going through. Look, there are obviously professionals who can help, and whether that's a local, you know, psychologist, support group. In Victoria, there's a great group called Wire. Maybe speaking to a financial counsellor rather than advisor, but just talk to someone. I think that was the first thing Marie Lallensack said. She was sailing around the world. She had nobody else, nowhere to go. Until she got off that boat. And then she just goes, I wish I'd confided in more people. I kept it to myself. Whereas if I'd shared it, what they say, share it and halve it, the burden. So talking to someone to start with and just going, look, you know, he always wants $20 for a pizza. Is this normal? And the person might go, yeah, you know, it is. You're a couple. Share it. Get over yourself. Or others might go, you know what? I'm uncomfortable with that. That is a bit weird. You're like, oh, thank God. You know, I thought so too. Where, yeah, you just need that sounding board to go, am I out of line here, or do I need to trust my gut?
Yeah. Are there other phone numbers, places that people can reach out to that you know of, that maybe we could put, because before I go into that, we do have a link to the financial abuse course, and AFA members are getting a discount. Anyone who's actually on this webinar today can get a discount to that course with a code. I put that in the chat box, but we'll be sending that out as well. But maybe if we've got a link of, you know, places that people could reach out to as well, because I know we're running out of time.
The Money Smart website that we mostly know and love has a section on financial abuse. The Women's Agenda discusses what you need to know and where to go if it happens to you. We've seen Belinda Haji-Hazelman around the AFA. She runs Financy. There's resources that she has. The Australian Banking Association has a financial abuse fact sheet. A lot of the big four now have something in place for their tellers and frontline workers so that they can spot abuse when, you know, people are marched into the bank to start withdrawing large lump sums. So, you know, we can take it to, you know, the person's other professional help as well to, you know, sit down with them at Centrelink or whatever it takes. So there's definitely resources.
At the beginning of that YouTube link, so I want everyone to watch it for sure, right? There is one of the speakers. She literally lists the main key organisations that specialise in economic abuse, and she references a few in Australia. So to watch that YouTube video, even if immediately you just watch the first 10 minutes of it, you'll pick the big four up, the main charities that are specifically supporting in this area.
There needs to be more than just 4 big charities.
I know, but they're good charities. They're doing a lot. I know. They're doing a lot of work.
Yeah. Look, I am aware that I was going to go through more questions, and I'm sorry if I didn't get back to everybody.
Might need to do a part B, Amy.
We may have to do a part B. But don't hesitate to reach out to the three of us, you know, because we are around. So I'm more than happy if a question wasn't answered and you really want to reach out to us, or you haven't had a chance to ask a question, don't hesitate to get in touch with us. And you can do that directly through the AFA, but you could look us all up on LinkedIn. We're pretty easy to find. We're pretty outspoken people, aren't we?
Just Google.
So I just want to thank everybody that have been here and those who are going to watch later. And thank you so much for your time, ladies. Amanda, Michelle.
Thanks for hosting us and the AFA too. For AFA members, there's also 8 CPD points when you do the course. So that's a bonus for Australian members too. So all good.
We don't get that over here. I got the UK lot moaning at me.
It costs too much money to get it accredited.
No, it's ridiculous. Good work, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you.